Good evening. I'm Eve, filling in for Hattie on tonight's episode. CF Montreal keep their heads above water before decision day with a big home win over Portland. Mauro Biello unveils his squad for the men's national team's friendly in Japan. And the women's national team drops an exciting friendly announcement. All that and more on episode 150 of The Ball is Round. And I am, as always, so thrilled to be joined by my esteemed co-host, Elias Grigoriadis.
Oh.
How are you on this fallish Tuesday evening?
Not too bad, not too bad. I just realized that, this is the first time in like 4 months that we've had a show where the player in our intro video is actually in the team and playing, which is something I just realized now while watching the intro video, which is kind of nice. But I'm doing all right. How about you?
I can't complain. And certainly, I think all the happier because this is a pretty monumental episode for us. It's number 150. Yeah, definitely disappointed, that Hattie couldn't be here to share in that experience and share that joy with us. Unfortunately, he has some familial obligations, but I can't believe it's been 150 episodes. It feels like we started yesterday. This is my third season now, and Elias, obviously you've just completely fit in so well this year.
No, thank you for having me.
I mean, you're coming up on, a good 30 to 40 episodes of being here yourself.
Exactly. So
yeah.
As one of the more recent additions to the show, thank you for welcoming me in and opening your doors to me, and it's been great. So meeting the both of you and talking all this nonsense live on the air, it's great.
Exactly. Couldn't imagine doing it with any other co-hosts, including Adi. Yeah. Anyway, we do have a pretty big episode tonight because we have both CF Montreal and men's national team and women's national team stuff to talk about. So shall we dive in?
Let's do it right away.
Let's go. All right. So CF Montreal were coming into their final home game of the regular season in MLS with a pretty nasty slump. Honestly, they were winless in 7. And Lassi Lapalainen had picked up a crucial point in a 1-1 draw for them versus the Houston Dynamo, also at home in a midweek match Wednesday of last week. Of course, this left Montreal clinging to the 9th place play-in position in the Eastern Conference standings. However, definitely no guarantees, especially with a red-hot Portland Timbers coming to town. Elias, I know you'd shown us the analysis not that long ago, and they were one of the top 5 in the league for form, and Montreal was at the bottom of that list, or pretty close to it anyway.
Exactly. They continued that form, and other teams that dropped off, they were the most informed team in the league by the time they got to Montreal. So
exactly. But I'm going to give you credit before we dive in, because you were the one who had said, Montreal has this thing of playing up to the level of their opposition a lot of the time when they've been
down to it,
and down to them. Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword, and you were a little bit prescient with that take, so good for you. It was not a hot take. So let's take a look at the squad going into Saturday's match. So Hernan Lozada put out a squad, which I don't think contained too many surprises, but of course I'll let you speak on it. We had Jonathan Serrois in net. Various defenders had finished being suspended for card accumulations and red cards and all that good stuff. So we had a back 3 of Gabriele Corbo, Joel Waterman, and George Campbell. Samuel Piet, the captain, of course. Nathan Saliba in the midfield. On the flanks, we had Mathieu Choinière and Ariel Lassiter on the right and left, respectively. And we had Mahala Opoku, Sanusi Ibrahim, and Ramel Kyoto attacking for the team. What did you make of this lineup? I thought it was
this actually got
pretty bold.
me really excited. Yeah, this got me
Yeah.
really excited because for the first time, they were starting with a 3-4-3, right? They've had
Yeah.
moments throughout the season where they've shifted into a 3-4-3 when they've just
Mhm.
subbed on some strikers and needed a goal or something like that, and it's often worked really well because just the fact that there's a lot of strikers and a lot of forwards on this team that have a lot of pace, that like to play with the ball at their feet, that like to be
Mhm.
aggressive, and that's something that, when you have natural wingers, you get to explore a lot more, and they worked like gangbusters, right? They overloaded the flanks on both sides. You had Lassiter and Chouanier making overlapping runs. You had them cutting to the inside, and the width was still preserved because you had wingers. So this was, you know, I understand that this was brought back because Lemon Kyoto was healthy and played on that left wing spot. But this was like almost a feeling of, why is this the first time in weeks that we've seen them
Yeah.
start with this formation? I can't remember the last time they started with a 3-4-3 and
Uh,
deployed it for more than an hour almost
yeah.
until Mahala and Kyoto basically got subbed off.
Yeah.
Um, so I
Yeah.
was I was thrilled with how it
Yeah.
played out. I was excited that they took, it was a bit of a gambit with the last home
Mhm.
game of the regular
And so
season,
much
and
pressure.
exactly. So it was a bit of a swing, but they knocked it out of the park, right? 4-1 is a great result, and the first half, just the first, few sequences going forward, you could tell that,
Mhm.
Mahala's at his preferred position. Kyoto, who is naturally a winger, was at his preferred position. Just everybody seemed to
Yeah.
be a lot more
Everyone
comfortable
seemed to
what was going on.
fit in, exactly.
Exactly.
So,
That was great.
yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot that happened in that match. It was a 4-1 win, so there were no shortage of goals to discuss. And this match in particular, like the weather, it was a beautiful night at the stadium if you were a duck, maybe. But if you were a human, it was not a beautiful night at the stadium. It was cold. It had been torrentially raining all day. It was pretty miserable. And I think the opening sequence of play made it clear that the players hadn't found their footing. The pitch was a little bit waterlogged, to say the least. We had seen more beautiful football played on the surface at
Absolutely.
Stade Saputo, and poor players were kind of slipping and sliding everywhere. And I was like, oh boy, we are in for an ugly night. But patience paid off because in the
Yeah.
30th minute, Mathieu Chouanier played a long ball over Portland's back line, which Mahala Opoku ran onto. He drove toward the goal line and played a low cross through the 6-yard box, which keeper David Bingham didn't manage to capture. Sanusi Ibrahim, of course, playing as that central striker role, was surging to the um, kind of towards the back post, and he was completely unmarked. And with Bingham obviously distracted by the ball, he just had a very simple tap in to open the scoring. What do you make of this goal? It was really direct play by Montreal, which is something that I think they have not been successful with, but they were incredibly successful with on that Saturday night.
Yeah, I was so sure that that goal was offside that I didn't even bother writing it until
Uh,
the ref kinda said, "Check complete, don't worry about it," and everyone in the press box was kind of in
yeah,
agreement,
the
right? And we
replays
were
look the
and
same.
it's because that center back Zuperich, I believe, was on his way
Hmm.
stepping up while Mahala was running the opposite direction, so it just looked like the gap was even bigger than we had
Hmm.
expected, which is why everyone
Hmm.
just naturally assumed offside, but, credit to them for sticking with it and converting, but it also showed that Montreal came to grips with this very rainy pitch and the
Hmm.
conditions much quicker than Portland did because just the ball retention and the ability to accelerate play on a pitch like that is not easy. So the fact that
Yeah.
they were able to do that, not off the get go, but relatively much earlier than Portland
Adjusted
was,
eventually, like kind of as
shows
the
that,
game went
yeah,
on.
that
Yeah.
shows that it rains a lot in Portland, so I was surprised to see them struggle with the rain that much. But
Mm.
credit to Montreal where they got a grip on the conditions much earlier than Portland did.
That is true. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you there. Um, yeah, but overall, like I mean, I think we've seen Montreal try to go direct earlier this year. In other matches, like I think of and some of their road matches are ones that I think of as well. Where they've tried to go direct and it just hasn't worked. It's looked like a hopeless long ball to nobody. But whatever happened Saturday night, they finally clicked. They finally weighted those passes properly. Players timed their runs appropriately. And so I think if that's something that they can repeat more than once, because it's a little late in the season to say if it's a viable tactic for them. But even if it's something they can build on for next season, I think maybe there's hope there that they can finally approach a game where you're going to end up having to play a little bit of your uglier football and get through it.
Yeah. Just the
Yeah.
fact that you have that many forwards means that you can maybe
Yeah.
bank on a missed touch. There's someone there in the
Hmm.
offense. It's not just two forwards fighting for their lives, and maybe you get a
Hmm.
midfielder to help them out or a wing back. There's a
Yeah.
group of them together that are working together.
Yeah, for sure. And we have a comment here from Patrick who says, despite the goals, they were playing nicer football than usual. Um, I mean, it definitely wasn't the nicest, I think, that we've seen, just because the conditions made it miserable. But it was not bad looking on the eyes. Like, we have seen them play some really dire football this year. We have seen some really unattractive soccer from them. And I wholeheartedly agree that it was probably the nicest soccer, the most cohesive soccer that they've played in good several weeks. I mean, we've shown up to some of these episodes. I've shown up like, what the hell am I going to say about these guys?
What a squash!
Yeah. Yeah. No, the rain can just certainly help the ball move faster on the pitch. I think like towards the end of the game, it was kind of going a little too far with the rain on the pitch.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, it did zip along well enough earlier in the game. And as well, we do
at
just
least they
have
had a
quick,
control. Oh, thank you,
yeah.
Robbie.
Yeah, we just have a quick comment from Robbie who says, good evening and congrats on the 150th show. Thanks for that. Happy to be here. And thank you for joining us for the 150th. So, in the 32nd minute, Montreal had to yet another scoring opportunity. I say yet another, even though kind of it was their first big scoring opportunity where they scored. When Ramel Kyoto received a long ball over the top for himself, once again, another direct play that worked out very well. Unfortunately, though, he got tangled up in his own feet inside the 18-yard box, allowing the keeper to capture the ball. How much more relieved would you be going into decision day if Ramel Kyoto had found his scoring boots on Saturday night?
I was
Or
a
how
little
much more
disappointed he didn't
confident, I should
score,
say. Yeah.
but the thing that made me the thing that I really enjoyed is that
Mhm.
Montreal had this entire game and they scored 4 goals with 0 goal contributions from Kyoto. No assists, no nothing. Well, he did assist the Shwanya goal, sorry.
Stroniago, yeah.
But, besides, laying it off to Shwanya, who, let's be real, did a lot of the work on that goal,
Mhm.
there was no goal involvement from Kyoto, which
It wasn't
is
all on his
huge
shoulders.
because you're looking at someone that everyone is seeing as the return of, like, "Oh my god, the Messiah is back. We can start scoring
Mm.
again." But a lot of the work was done around him because at the end of the day, his biggest contribution, yes, is his stats are important, but you could see it immediately from the Houston game as well. It's not just what he does with the ball, it's what
Mhm.
he brings to the group, to the mentality. He's
Mhm.
never satisfied. We saw so many times where if there was a misplay or if there was a missed opportunity going forward and there could have been, a ball played back or a cutback or maybe someone should have shot, everyone kind of just goes, "Oh, well, next time." But Kyoto in the game against Houston and in the game against Portland got in your face. He told you, and
Mhm.
he didn't treat you with kid gloves. He told you like a grown up, that was the wrong play. Give me the ball next time. Or that was the wrong play. Square the ball next time. And you could tell that everybody just had this hunger.
Yeah.
And he seems to be driving a lot of that. So I think that was probably the biggest thing they missed. And hopefully we get to see that kind of hunger on the road as well, because that would be a nice indicator of maybe this team having a bit more teeth. Or
Mhm.
like, like was said at the post game presser, a little more grinta that,
Mhm.
has been not just sorely missed on the road, that has been non-existent, away from
Yeah.
Satsuputo. So I think that was Kyoto's biggest contribution over the last week was
Mhm.
just the fact that he kind of lit this fire under everyone's ass that they woke up and began playing at the level that they know they're capable of.
No, that's a really good point, and I think it's something probably that you don't necessarily see if you're watching it on TV as well, because you might have to be there in person because the camera angle doesn't necessarily capture, um, you know, that kind of off the ball interaction. So no, I think that is a really good call out. So I I agree with you, and I appreciate it. So let's keep on going because we have so many goals to break down.
My
In the
God, so
30th,
many goals.
I know it's such a rare joy. In the 35th minute, Mahala Opoku showed some wonderful footwork of his own, and he actually made MLS's Checkers Tuesday for his involvement here.
Did he?
Um, he did to keep the ball, and he transitioned the play, by dribbling it well into the opposition half. He wound up getting fouled in the final third, though, but luckily the loose ball squirted to Mathieu Chouanière. He quickly laid it off to Ibrahim, who was on the right flank. Ibrahim played a low cross of his own, which was blocked by a defender. However, the ball came back to Ibrahim, and he passed the ball to Opoku, who had recovered and was upright once again. And he took a quick touch and did a very composed finish. I think it did deflect slightly to wrong with the keeper, but it was on target nonetheless, and he was credited with the goal to make it 2-0 for Montreal. So we had Opoku assisting Sanusi. Then we had Sanusi assisting Opoku. Is this an attacking duo that we were sleeping on, Elias?
I think that Mahala just has this natural chemistry with everybody in the team at this point, right? We've seen him with everyone now, every
Mm-hmm.
attacker, every combination, and he seemed to connect really well with all of them, right? Even Mason Toy and Chino
Mm-hmm.
Ofor. He's managed to highlight some of the better parts of their game when
Mm-hmm.
they've been paired up together. So again, I wasn't too surprised that him and Sunusi got along well. They have similar profiles. They have similar mentalities of like, I get the ball, I'm trying to get forward, I'm trying to attack a back line, especially if it's a big back line that's physical but not super quick, which kind of plays right into their hands. And
Yeah.
you could tell that energy in the first half, and that energy is what led to the goal, right? Because if you miss a cross, you tend to maybe sometimes you jog to the ball, you get the ball, you reset possession. No,
Mm-hmm.
he got the ball, picked it up right away, and said, "Who's open now?"
Yep.
So that kind of energy and that kind of willingness to keep getting forward is first of all something that I'm sure Osada
Mm-hmm.
is thrilled by, but also something
Yeah.
that worked incredibly well. When everyone's on the same
Agree.
page, it shows how good this Losada ball is when everyone's on the same page and there's gaps and there's stuff to exploit and the team is
And there's just
is
that
clicking.
willingness, that drive, that hunger.
Yeah,
Because I mean, let's face it, Montreal was kind of in a desperate situation coming into this
yeah,
match. Like it
absolutely, and
was
they kind
very much a backs to the wall situation. It was do or die. They had a strong risk of being eliminated from playoffs if they didn't, depending on how other results went on the night, which we will talk about later on. But yeah, definitely, definitely interesting to see it finally executed. Unfortunately, so late in the season. But again, maybe an interesting
this
building
year
block for
this year was
next
about
year.
growing pains, right? So next year,
I
hopefully,
think
we
we've
see
had
more
our
games
fair
like this
share.
more consistently. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. We did have a comment that I think fits in really well here from Patrick, who says, "Did Opoku have a Jamie Tart moment? Don't play to me, but through me." Kind of, actually,
A little
because
bit.
he was present, on so much that went well offensively for Montreal. So I'm gonna say like kind of, yeah.
Yeah, when he played more centrally, right, in the two striker,
Yeah,
he was forced to be the focal point that always received the ball and then had to turn and then had to dribble everybody and then had
yeah,
to create. And now
yeah.
on the wing, it looked like there was a load off his shoulders, right?
Yeah, there was a lot
Kind
more
of talked about it
freedom.
at the end in the post game presser where he
Yeah.
was talking about how this was first of all it's his preferred position and
Mhm.
he felt more comfortable. He felt like in those moments where it's just pure instinct and muscle memory, he ended up making the right
Mhm.
plays because these is a position he's played since he was a kid.
Mhm.
And when you play in the middle against these big 6'4" strikers that always have an elbow on your head,
Yeah, you're
that's
physically
not
at a
always
bit of
something
a
that happens.
disadvantage. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that
Mhm.
if there's the chance to play a 3-4-3, I think you have to play it against Columbus, but we'll talk about that later.
We
But
will.
I think that this was a very nice show of what this team can do going forward.
For sure, for sure. And just a couple other comments before we move on. Patrick White says something I agree with. When he's fit, Kyoto's one of the better attackers in the
Yeah.
league. Sorry, I definitely agree. I mean, look at last season, the numbers that he put up when he
Mhm.
stayed fit for the vast majority of the season. So yeah, totally agree with that comment. I don't.
And
Do you have anything to add?
when he's relied upon, I mean, look, when Georgi Mihailovic went down with his ankle injury,
Yep.
Romelu Kyoto was playing at an MVP level. He was at over
Yeah.
a goal a game. He was incredible. It's just the problem is how long can
Staying
you actually
healthy.
have him for? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Sustaining. And Michael T says 3-4-3 much greater than 5-3-2. I'm
I'm inclined
like,
to agree,
it's a
right?
small
I'm
it's a
inclined
small
to
sample
agree.
size,
I
but
think with the people they had at their
yeah.
disposal, I think yes. I think if Anthony Vissin is in the lineup,
And
it's a different conversation because
mhm.
then you go with, Mahala and Kyoto with Vilsain as like maybe a 10 or
And
something
it
like that. Or there's
yeah,
so many different configurations. But I
but it
think
also
that
takes a lot of the burden, I think, off having a 10 who's excelling when you play in this
yeah,
3-4-3 that we used on Saturday, which we know has been a struggle. Montreal has really struggled to identify their true number 10 in the other formations that they played this year. So I think that also kind of eliminates a little bit of that headache, just because you have a much greater diversity for your attack, having more wide players. You know, so I think that's another advantage of it. While they try to sort out, who's going to rise to the top of that pack,
or if they need someone to rise to the top
or
of
if
that
or
pack.
if they, and there we go. Well, in that case, I think Olivier Enrique's going to be like, well, what do I do with all these guys?
Well,
Um,
I think Bryce Duke has the ability to play
yeah.
a pretty strong, inside forward, maybe on the left hand side where he doesn't
Hmm.
have to dribble,
Hmm.
play without the ball as much. He can play on the ball more, and he can
Hmm.
maybe, get into those nooks and crannies that he enjoys so much, and not have to
Hmm.
worry about the 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 back and forth that sometimes tends have to go to, where he can maybe just stick to that position. He
Hmm.
could play with the overlap. He can combine with the striker.
Hmm.
It could be something that I think Bryce Duke has the right profile for. But again, he struggled in his natural position, so not everybody that
Yeah,
has
it's a
the right
little
profile
iffy to
necessarily
say.
adapts to something that would suit them. So
Yeah,
I'd like to
exactly.
see him maybe try somewhere different, but at the end of the day, you have to do what's best
We
for the team, and right now they're best without a 10.
Yeah, exactly. Wholeheartedly agree with you because they have no choice but to be the best they can right now. So let's move along to the second half of the match. I'm not even going to force you to do like the what would Arna Lazada have said, because I think he would have just said, "Keep doing what you're doing,
No
please,
notes.
please."
No notes.
No notes. Just everything. Just
Just don't blow it. Just
copy and paste for the second half, please.
and they did.
um, they kind of did, yeah. So, I mean, all the onus was really on Portland in the second half. Obviously, Montreal was carrying what I like to call the most dangerous lead into the second half.
Because it is.
Um, because it is. I saw somebody recently cough one up and I smiled to myself bitterly. Um,
I love being
anyway,
vindicated.
yeah, it's a little sick. And Portland did definitely see like a lot more possession in the second half. However, we didn't necessarily see a ton of chances created from that possession. It was until they actually scored their goal very, very late in the match. Aside from a chance off kind of a corner that ping ponged everywhere in the box. They didn't necessarily generate very, very many attacking chances at all in the second half. So that was what it was. But Montreal, despite lacking a lot of the possession in the second half, they still managed to capitalize. And to be specific, in the 64th minute, Mathieu Choignard, he all but sealed the 3 points for Montreal with a very, very nice goal. So Montreal recovered the ball in their own half, quickly played the ball along the left wing to Kyoto. He carried the ball down the left-hand side of the pitch. Mathieu Choignard was drifting in a little bit more centrally, but still definitely to the right-hand side, just outside the 18-yard box. And Kyoto was able to play the ball like completely horizontally to Choignard, despite there being a fair amount of distance between the two of them on the pitch. I really don't know where the Portland players were. But nonetheless, Mathieu Choignard received the ball, set himself up, and took a very, very powerful shot that beat David Bingham at his near post to make it 3-0 on the night. I think we've said a lot of wonderful things about Mathieu Choignard this season. I think we've thrown lots of flowers his way. I think he's deserved much of the praise that we've given him. Anything to say on this goal, Elias?
Just that it kind of shows this goal here kind of shows more of his evolution as a player than like we've given him his flowers and gawked at how much he's grown as a player, but this here really showed how much he's improved the mental side of it, because
Mm-hmm.
every player gets that ball and sends a cross in first time, and you could see this like moment of hesitation that Schweinsteiger
Yeah,
takes, where
yeah.
he notices that
Like he has
the
so much
keeper's
space in front
cheating,
of him. Yeah,
but just also the fact that the keeper's cheating and
yeah.
the keeper's anticipating a cross, and this isn't really something that you notice if you're watching on TV, but from the press box, we had the perfect angle. That
Mm-hmm.
gap was enormous. It was a very well placed shot, but it literally
Yeah.
all it had to do was stay true and stay on target, and it was a goal because the keeper was cheating so much. And you
He
could
was
see,
so
like, if you go
prepared.
and
Yeah.
rewatch the way that Schwaniao goes about taking that shot, is he's lining up for a cross first, and he's got his eyes on where he's aiming in the box, and then he notices
Mm-hmm.
how much the goalie's cheating, and he completely shifts his body position and he lets it fly. And by that time, the goalie realizes what's going on, and it's too late.
It's
But
too late.
that kind of heads up play is an incredible example of the the maturing that he's had
Yeah.
in terms of, yes, he's gone much better and he's filled out the shirt a bit more and he's not getting thrown around in terms of the way he carries himself, yes, but in terms of just the psychology of the game, he's
Mm-hmm.
that shows how much growing he's done, because again, every player that gets a ball in that position and sees Kyoto, sees Sunusi, heading into the box after after receiving a ball like that, automatically you think second post cross, and then
Yeah.
try and find the head. And so even the goalie saw it, right? Even the
Yeah.
goalie immediately said, okay, cross is coming in, so I'm getting ready. So that was such a nice just reaction to all this. You intake all this information and then you come out with
Mm-hmm.
the perfect play. So that was such a nice just
Like a
demonstration of
reward.
how far
Yeah.
he's come. Exactly.
Yeah. No, wholeheartedly agree with you. And I mean, for me, I honestly, I kind of hope that he'll be like, we're going to talk about this obviously later on when Montreal season ends, whenever that is. But I kind of hope he gets named MVP this season.
Team
I
MVP.
think he,
Mean, it's between him and Jonathan Silva, right?
but there's
Silva might win
defensive
Defensive
player
Player
of
of
the
the
year.
Year.
Yeah.
He might just win Defensive Player of the Year, and then Schwaniel will win MVP. But yeah, I think that those two, in the worst of times, have been the
Mm-hmm.
only beacon of light, and now in the best of times, they're kind of getting their flowers, which is nice. But through thick and
Exactly.
thin, they've been hands down the best,
Yeah.
players in the group.
Agree. Um, Alrighty. So anyway, shortly after this goal, we did have a triple sub made by Lazada. So Lassi Lapalainen, Mason Toy, and Zachary Brogiard entered for the attacking line, Opoku, Ibrahim, and Kyoto. No great surprise there on my end, especially with Ramel Kyoto's fitness being, as always, questionable at best. But, um, yeah, I wasn't surprised to see the subs made that were made, particularly with the scoreline as it was as well. And just kind of ensuring the health and safety of everyone out there, because they are definitely all going to be very important if Montreal wants to have a hope of a play-in match.
Just a prayer.
Yeah, exactly. And good news is that our substitute Mason Toy was also able to get in on the scoring action.
Oh,
So
this made me so happy.
he scored Montreal's fourth and final goal of the evening. So Ariel Lassiter crossed the ball, which was very poorly parried by Bingham, and it fell to a wide open Mason Toy, who scored from admittedly a very tight angle. Like I would call it a Ramel Kyoto-esque angle. And anyway, a goal for a guy who's been in a drought since his brace against Minnesota. He's been benched, by coaches, or even just straight up dropped by the coach's choice. And I'm sure that was definitely a big relief for him. Anything to add on the goal?
just I saw him take that first touch, which wasn't ideal, and put it at that tight angle. I was like, "Oh no, he's don't tell me he's gonna miss this." And then ended up going in. And I just think
Mhm.
that that's so needed for him just as an individual, right? The game was
Mhm.
already won by that point, and I think
Oh
just the
yeah.
fact that, it's not much, but for him, it probably meant the world
Mhm.
because he's had such a rough go of it lately. Because I do think that he can be a really, really strong squad player in almost any MLS team. He's got the right build for it. He's got the speed. He's got, he's decent with the ball. He's got
Mhm.
great positioning, and just that finishing touch has always eluded him. But it's a very psychological
I was gonna say because
aspect,
this
right? Because we've
hasn't
seen he's had
always
runs where he's been
yeah.
great,
Like, when he first came
but
to Montreal, he was amazing.
exactly,
And
he
then
was shot out of a
unfortunately
cannon, right? Yeah.
yeah, and then
He had a
unfortunately he picked
difficult
up that
end to the year
season-ending
last
injury.
year,
Yeah.
and he had a difficult end to the year last year, right? Where just like he couldn't buy a goal. And then this
Yeah.
year with, some
He
more
picked up his
injury
injury super early.
misfortune and
Yeah.
just, never really seeming to fit.
Yeah.
But he's got so many good qualities as that
Mhm.
honestly could fit into almost any team in MLS. And I think that a
Mhm.
lot of teams could see him as a decent rotational player at worst, if not a very reliable second striker at best. And
Mhm.
it's unfortunate that his time in Montreal hasn't been perfect, but a goal like that is just, you can't help but smile at someone who works hard and just doesn't have the best of luck and, you know,
Yeah. Exactly.
earns a goal.
No.
It wasn't a gimme either, it was a proper good
Yep.
positioning, good
Nope.
finish. And
No, it was definitely, I think, a little bit more of a challenging finish given the tightness of the angle, for sure. Unfortunately, though, Montreal was not going to be able to keep a clean sheet on the night because in the 86th minute, Frank Boli scored a consolation goal for the visitors with a backheel flick. There was some debate about a handball, and the Montreal players were definitely very passionate and channeled a certain other team that I thought of when they did this, when they lobbied the ref pretty intensely. Um, However, VAR didn't see anything wrong. Referee was not called to the monitor or anything. And especially Elias, after you mentioned that you were pretty sure that there might have been a shade of offside in Upoku's action. Do you think this is maybe one call balances the other, or do you think this is a
well, I mean,
scandal?
we saw the replay at the end. We saw the
Yeah.
replay on the monitor. And it
Hmm.
was clear that Opoku was onside. And I think that the reason that this wasn't called a handball is because it deflected off Gabriela Corbo's foot first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look, if this were a tying goal or a goal to take the
Like,
lead or
no,
even
we'd
a
have
goal
a
to
lot
bring
more
it within
passionate
one,
feelings. Yeah.
it'd be I would have maybe asked my brother about it, or yeah,
Yeah.
asked the refs about it or something. Um, but it
But
really
it was
was
kind of
just a consolation
inconsequential.
goal,
Yeah.
and it was just, you know what,
Yeah.
whatever. The only person really I think annoyed about it is probably Corbo and Silva.
Yeah.
That Corbo getting beat and stuff like that, and Silva who loses his clean sheet. But I think everyone
Hmm.
takes the 4-1 and runs with it,
And
right?
run. I
So
totally.
I don't think anyone was too crushed about the fact that they picked up a, what was it, 85th minute consolation
86,
goal.
yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And I agree with you. Like, if you had gotten up on your soapbox, I was ready to be like, but the ball deflected off the guy's foot and they were so close to each other. So I was ready to like do the counter argument and be no fun. But as it turns out, you're good.
Yeah, no,
So
look, 4-1,
alas.
4-1 is great, and the way they
Okay,
played
well,
was,
yeah, I'll just save my hot takes then, or my contrarian nature for some other part of our show tonight.
well, there's always something, right? We'll find
Oh, there's
something.
gonna be something. We'll find something to argue about, I'm sure. Um, so anyway, I know that you attended to the presser and everything. Would you get any interesting tidbits or any interesting odds and ends from the comments that were made? Obviously, you mentioned that Opoku, expressed his preference for the
Yeah.
position that he played that evening, which I think is interesting. And we know that definitely some interesting comments have come out of pressers in recent weeks from the players.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah,
But
and
no, I mean, they're much better to interview when they're winning. It's
for
it's
sure, for sure.
it's pretty standard with every sports team in the entire world throughout history
Hmm.
that they give
Yeah,
much better quote when they've won, and that they've got a smile on their face. And there wasn't too
totally.
much to there wasn't nothing too scandalous. There wasn't a Samuel Piet lambasting the tactics after after the game or
Hmm.
anything like that. But
And
Yeah, everyone just
You,
seemed to be in a good mood
yeah.
for the first time in a
Good.
really long time. So you know what? I
Good.
think they deserve their enjoyment, and I think that 4 points. We said 4 points out of those two home games
Yeah.
is the bare minimum, and they got that. So
Well, that's why I said that they were gonna like end off. So actually, though, you
bring
know what?
on decision day.
I think I said that they were gonna get 4 points. Period. Because I think I when we talked about that, it included the Cincy game, if I recall correctly.
Okay, so that makes five
So
points,
they've
right? So
exceeded my expectations already.
that's
Regardless,
6 points in that last stretch, right? If you include the zero
the
zero with
draw versus
Chicago.
yeah, but I mean that's a fair few games, unfortunately. Um, so we did get a question, and I think it segues us really well to our next topic. And the question is from Tate. Will CF Montreal make the playoffs? And if they do, will they play a game at Stade Saputo? So, Elias, I'll let you give your thought first, and then I'll give mine.
Decision day. Ugh.
Decision day.
I
Should
think
we
it's
maybe look
very,
at the
very.
standings
Let's look at the standings.
in order to kind
Yeah,
of break down how likely we think this is going to be?
yeah.
Let's take a look
Let's
here.
do that
So
first.
the standings are a little wonky looking this week. So I cut off the teams that have already made it to the playoffs, like Nashville and above, just because it's kind of irrelevant. So in eighth place, we have Montreal on 41 points. In ninth place, we have DC on 40 points. However, they are actually eliminated because they've already played all 34 matches for the year.
That's peak
Um,
MLS right there.
so very MLS, and basically kind of on who all is left to play who all. Um, some team is going to be able to surpass them. Like somebody's going to get 3 points or somebody's going to
Yeah.
get 1 point. So DC is actually not playing any more games this season. They're done. That's also explains the rationale of why the Wayne Rooney departure was announced Saturday, and it's because they were done playing for the season. Anyway, in 10th place, we have New York on 40 points. Chicago is in 11th place on 40 points. We have Charlotte, who are in 12th place with 39 points. However, they have 2 games left to play this season instead of 1, like the rest of the teams. And in 13th place, we have NYCFC on 38 points. And then the remaining teams are eliminated. Miami, sadly for many neutrals of the North American soccer sphere, and of course Toronto, who pick up the wooden spoon for this year. So it is tight. It's cozy in those positions between 8th and 13th, to say the least. Kind of anybody can get in there with the proper results. And I thought maybe as well it'd be worth looking at who is playing whom
Yes,
after the
because there's a
international break.
lot of mixing and matching going
I
on
was
right now.
gonna say there's a lot of those faces are playing each other.
Yeah,
So
which
just
is
to take
great
a
for Montreal.
sort of, yeah. Unless there's a lot of draws for those folks on like the 40 points. So we have Miami and Charlotte who are actually playing midweek on the 18th because they had a match postponed earlier this season. Then for decision day, we have Charlotte versus Miami. So they play each other again. Cincinnati hosting Atlanta, which doesn't have much impact. Montreal is visiting Columbus. NYCFC is playing Chicago, which is very, very important. Nashville is hosting New York, which is also very, very important. New England is hosting Philadelphia, which is not really relevant to Montreal. So
This is the one thing Montreal has going for them is the fact that they automatically win any tiebreaker. And
pretty
if they are
much,
tied
yep.
on points with anybody, automatically
Yeah.
they win because the first tiebreaker is the amount of wins,
Yeah.
and they have 12. Everyone else has either 9 or 10, which
Yeah.
means that, if they're tied with anybody, so if you start seeing draws, which is why I don't hate draws. If I start seeing people tying, best news
That's
possible.
yeah,
Because
that's fair.
in an ideal world, everybody ties. And then even if Montreal loses, they finish 8th. So you know what? Bring on the teams between 8th and 13th this year, this last stretch of games have seemed incapable of stringing together more than one win. It's
Well,
as
that's
if
the thing.
nobody wants to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's as if they're all trying to tank for this Connor Bedard-like kid playing in NCAA, which just I don't understand why so many teams are not like. Anyway, this situation is more or less ideal because teams are playing one another, which means there's guaranteed to be drop points.
Mhm.
Even Red Bulls, I believe, who are playing Nashville on
Yeah,
decision day, Nashville has a chance, right? Nashville has the opportunity to step up in the standings
and get a
and maybe
home
even
game.
have a more preferable and not have to play Orlando and end up playing Philly or vice versa, or however, because again, the top of the Eastern Conference besides Cincinnati is also very congested. So decision day is going to be really
That
cool
is
to
true.
watch for the top of the table as well. Although I think
Mhm.
most people in Montreal will be focusing on the bottom half.
Yes.
But there's going like just because you're playing Nashville, they by no means have their spot locked up, which means you won't be forced to play against a heavily rotated squad.
No.
The
No.
team in the best position, I think, right now is Charlotte because
Totally.
they
I
have a home and home
wholeheartedly agree.
against a team whose
No, that's
momentum and
away
whose
and
morale
home.
has been shot.
Yeah.
Yes, they have a home and home right with Miami, and most likely Messi will be shut down for the season, given that he even if
Mhm.
he is fit
Well,
to
they're
play,
already
he's coming
eliminated.
off a tiny tear in his hamstring. Right,
Yeah.
they're not going to be risking it. The Argentinian Federation is probably going to has a very persuasive letter, let's say,
Somebody's ear.
sent to
Yeah.
in Tata Martino's inbox going, I know he's not playing, right? Wink, wink. Um,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, what are you playing for? So this is a team that seems emotionally in just like a very difficult spot because they had that hope, and as we all know from Ted Lasso, it's the hope that kills you.
Yeah.
So they got their Leagues Cup, they got their US Open Cup final. I think they're gonna wrap it up for the season and kind of just phone these two games in.
Mhm.
And I think that leaves Charlotte in a really good chance to pick up 4, maybe even 6 points, which will obviously catapult them into 8th.
Yeah.
Which means that there's one spot. I think this at this point it's Charlotte's play-in game
To
hosting
lose.
position to lose.
Mhm.
And then
Uh,
at the other games, you kind of just hope for general calamity and chaos that leads to
yeah.
drop points and ties and stuff like that. Because if
Mhm.
any teams win and Montreal lose, that leaves them in a really vulnerable spot because unless
Mhm.
New York City is the only team that with a win ends up tied with Montreal, everyone else with a win leapfrogs Montreal. We're operating under the assumption that Montreal is going to lose in Columbus, right?
The
Because
kind of, yeah. I mean,
because
Columbus
of all
is.
the available data and information and the fact that
Mhm.
it's Wilfried Nancy who can put the final nail in Montreal's coffin. And I
It's
just
so
think
very
that is
poetic and yeah.
he saw the schedule drop and probably started salivating at that decision
Oh,
day
yeah. Like, I mean,
matchup.
I mean,
So
statistically, they're 11-1-4 at home. Columbus
they
are.
are the
Montreal
best. They are
is.
I think they're the second best home team in the league. They
Yep.
score goals for fun. Montreal concedes goals on the road for fun.
Montreal
So I think
has 12 losses on the road.
operating under the
Yeah.
assumption that they're going to lose this game is not unfair to the
Nope.
team. If they can manage to MacGyver somehow manage to pull out a draw out of
Oh my god.
pure
We'll
chaos because of
I'll be
how open that
popping
game
the
is probably going to be
champagne
and
on the
how open
podcast.
Columbus likes to play,
Yep.
then all the better. But I think if you're a fan, you have to start looking at this decision day lineup with the assumption that Montreal is going to stay at 41 points and then everyone
And
else
so
needs to
let's see what everyone
tie
else is
except for
doing.
NYCFC.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that a lot of people might end up turning off or having one eye on Columbus, Montreal,
Yeah.
and another eye on everything else going on because at some point it's just I've never seen
Yeah.
a deck more heavily stacked against Montreal than this
It's
decision day game in
it's
Columbus.
a bad one. It's a
But
bad one.
look, possession is 9/10 of the law, right? They are in that 8th spot until they are not. So they just have to hold on for dear life. And
All
who
right.
knows, right? I haven't seen
Yep.
a very boring, drab, uneventful 0-0 from them in a while. So maybe they could pull one of those out of nowhere.
Chicago wasn't that long ago.
But that wasn't boring or drab, though. That
No,
was
I
just a
suppose.
case of missed opportunities, right?
Yeah, that was
If you
yeah.
get a 0-0 with 85% Columbus possession, but only like 3 shots on
Yeah.
target and like 45 shots off target, then you know what? Hey,
There's some.
A point is a
Yeah.
point, and then you've done
Yeah.
all you can.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
get everybody
Anyway.
behind the ball and hope for the best.
Yeah. So, in a very roundabout way, we have circled our way back to Tate's question. I
Yes.
think, Elias, it almost sounds like you're convinced that Charlotte is going to take that 8th spot, meaning that Montreal certainly won't
Yeah.
host a play-in game. But does Montreal take that 9th spot?
I think that they've done enough. I think that we've seen enough drop points around that 8th to 13th spot
Mm-hmm.
to justify that. Yeah, I think it could be very well could be a Montreal Charlotte play in with Charlotte as the host. And Patrick, made a very good point here, saying if we are to play on the road, I prefer to play in Charlotte. I agree
I
because
agree.
Montreal it's one of the
Has a
rare
decent
moments where
record.
Montreal's taken a point off of somebody on the road was that tie in Charlotte. So yeah, bring on Charlotte.
We've
Screw it.
got a great
I think
record.
that as
Yeah.
the way they've matched up throughout the season, I think Charlotte could probably be one of the more favorable matchups if you're looking for maybe something that
Mm-hmm.
could go past. And then remember, once you get into the playoffs, the first round is best of 3 for some reason, which means we have a playoff game in Montreal. So
What?
the first round of the playoffs is best of 3. It's not 2 legs.
Did I forget that?
Yeah, it's not great. It's
Why?
not the
Why?
best,
Why
but
is our league so
because they're
weird?
trying to be different.
Oh
It's
my
not
God, you're
great.
so right. You're so right. The wild card, then the round
Yeah, the
one.
play-in
Oh,
is
sweet
is
Lord.
is is one game, but the first
Oh,
round
why is our
is
league? Why?
is
Yo.
best 2 out of
Okay, yeah,
3
no, sorry. I had mixed up
the
our play
entire
in and our
world
and the
uses 2
play.
legs and it's a perfect system. So MLS looks at that and goes, "No,"
Yeah. Oh my
because
God.
reasons.
Okay. Too tired. Okay. Well, Don Garber has just managed to personally exhaust me. So congratulations, Don. Oh boy. It's just random. I don't know how else to say
Thanks,
it.
Don. You've broken Eve. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure we were like on the last leg here, so all good. All right. So, Elias, you have answered like yes, Montreal's going to squeak into 9th and then head down to North Carolina.
What do you
Um,
think?
I think that I'm going to look at the abstract. I know you mentioned stats and stuff. I'm going to mention the abstract. Like Montreal has not had a single thing go their way this season. Like they have had the
That is
worst
also
luck.
very true.
Honest to
That's
God,
true.
I think like there's a black cat that lives at Centre Nutricade or something and just walks across the pitch when they're training. I don't know if they're breaking mirrors in the locker room. I don't know if like people are walking like I'm getting to the point, and maybe it's because it's spooky season. I'm starting to question like the occult and so on and so forth. If as I think like Didier Drogba cursed the striker position when he left. That's
See,
like
that one I'm
my little
inclined to believe.
see, like, yeah, and that's my little tinfoil hat moment that I'm willing to lean into because it has not been the same since he left. Anyway, I digress and circle back. So I'm gonna say, unfortunately, no. I think Montreal's luck this year has just shown that they are not going to get any breaks. I don't think Wilfred Nancy is going to want to give them a break. I'm sure Rudy Camacho also has a point to
I
prove,
doubt it.
especially given that he didn't necessarily cover himself in glory on his return to Montreal.
That is true.
So for me, yeah, I I have nothing else to say.
So who do you think ends up
Unfortunately,
8th and 9th then? Who have you got for the play-in?
you managed to talk me into Charlotte. I agree with you
It's a
that I
great
think
spot.
Miami are very, very takeable. So I could certainly see that. And for the other one, I'm gonna say Frank Klopas does his beautiful
Ooh.
Klopas ball all the way to the play-in spot.
Well, they've been cooking, right? And they cooked Miami. So,
Yeah,
very
but then
possible.
I mean, they lost this past weekend to Charlotte nonetheless.
That is true.
Yeah, so I
It
mean,
is Klopas ball after all.
they're not super hot, but that's also then we can get some poetic quote unquote justice with Kai Kamara making of the playoffs or the play in
Oh, that'll go over
as Montreal
great.
missed.
That'll go over
Yeah,
like
exactly.
gangbusters.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Wilfred Nancy's team eliminates us, then Kai Kamara takes Montreal's spot. Yeah,
Oh
that's
my
that's
god, can you
that's a
imagine?
storyline very much in keeping with this 2023 season. So you
Oh
know
my
what? I'm
god.
gonna lean into that
I'm staying off. I'm
because
not staying off Twitter that day. It's gonna be unbearable.
join the club. Join the club. Anyway, we do have, of course, a week kind of to let our thoughts and our hot takes marinate.
International break.
Because it is international break right now. So we will see in 2 weeks whether one of us was right or neither of us were right. And maybe Montreal will be hosting a play in match
Can you
because the
imagine?
stars will finally have aligned.
Because Wilfred Nancy
And
threw us a bone. Yes.
well, I
I
think
doubt it.
I'm gonna let Patrick's comments sum it up the best. Our only hope is greater desperation and the Columbus players taking us lightly. That's the
Columbus
spirit I
has
want to
the
go
chance.
into my
Columbus
last
is
game of the
fighting
season
to
with.
host a playoff game. Columbus is gonna be fighting to host a playoff game.
Mm.
Or to sorry, not to host a playoff game, but
To skip
to
the
finish top four.
yeah,
So I don't think they'll be taking anything lightly. I think this is do or die for them as well
yeah,
because they're in fourth place, and yeah, that third to third to sixth is separated by 5 points, and New England
yeah,
has 2 games. It's just a whole mess there for the top
yeah,
four. So definitely
yeah,
won't be taking
exactly.
it lightly.
Nope. Alrighty. So on that super encouraging note, let's move on to national team action, shall we?
National team, yay!
Alrighty. So, interim men's coach Mauro Biello, who we of course know very, very well here in Montreal, announced his squad for a friendly tournament or a friendly match, sorry, taking place between the men's national team and Japan in Japan. And let's take a look at some of these interesting names.
Lots of interesting names.
Indeed. So for our goalkeepers, and I would take most of these positions like with a grain of salt, aside for goalkeeper. So we have Milan Borjan, Maxime Crépeau, Dane Sinclair. For defenders, we have Samuel Adekugbe, Moise Bombito, Derek Cornelius, Alfonso Davies, Luc de Fougerolles, Alistair Johnston, Richie Larea, Kamal Miller, and Stephen Vittoria. In the midfield, Mathieu Chouanière, Stephen Eustachio, Ishmael Kone, Jonathan Osorio, Harry Patton, Samuel Piet, and in the attacking phase, we have Charles Andreas Brim, Jonathan David, Junior Hoylett, Kyle Laren, and Liam Miller. So we've got some familiar names, we've got some interesting names, we've got some new names. Give me your thoughts, Elias. Who are
First
you
thing I
happy
noticed
to
was
see? Go for it.
happy. Oh, Mathieu Chouanière. I mean, how can you not,
Same.
right? I mean, if he hadn't, then you would start to question the sanity of the selection committee because
Well, I'd start to
he
wonder,
wasn't
like,
called
did
up
he
for
do something
Nations
to really make
League.
someone angry?
Yeah, like whose dog did he kick or something? Because what
Yeah.
does this kid have to do to get a call up? And then my mind went to what does Jonathan Siwa have to do to get a call up either? Because when you're tied for the league lead in clean sheet or second place in clean sheets,
Mm-hmm.
and you're doing all this and you're carrying a team that has been
Mm-hmm.
um at the very
Not
least
hot.
poor defensively. What more do you have to do? And seeing people look, we already talked about how important this World Cup is in 2026 and how this is
Mm-hmm.
literally a once in a lifetime opportunity. You have your Canadian golden generation so far,
Mm-hmm.
and you're hosting a World Cup, and they're going to be players. Maybe Canada's games won't be in Canada, but there will be a World Cup on Canadian soil, which is
Mm-hmm.
something you just cannot afford to miss. And I think that games like this and situations like this are when you have to start shaping your World Cup squad. And players that will not be in the World Cup squad,
Like a Stephen
people
Vittoria,
like
like a Milan
Steven
Borjan.
Vittoria, people even Junior Hoylett, who's going to be like
Yeah, that's
35,
also
36 when the World
good
Cup rolls
name.
around.
Yeah.
I understand that these people have built the foundations that Canada soccer that this
Mm-hmm.
men's team currently stands on. But at some point, you have to go. Thank you for your service. We need to look towards the future. And there's people like Joel Waterman, people like Chantal Sirois, and again, this is through our Montreal lens. But there's an incredible amount of Canadian talent out there
Mm-hmm.
that is just waiting to be discovered or waiting to see how they fit into the grand scheme of the Canadian national team. And people like that who will be either taking minutes or or visibility time away from those people is very disappointing. And as Patrick said, right, they're getting ready for Copa America. But again, at the end of the day, you are using Copa America to prepare for the World Cup. That's the only reason you're in Copa. That's the reason why every World Cup host is in the Copa America before the World Cup. Is because you're getting ready for the World Cup. You're getting ready, and you're using big that big game,
Mm-hmm.
high level, high stakes tournament, right? You need to start bringing in the next generation. And Milan Borjan will not be a starter in the World Cup. Steven Vitória will not be a starter in the World Cup. You still don't know who your starting goalie will be, right? Milan Borjan was hands down the starter. But now is it Maxime Crépeau? Is it Jonathan Sirois? Is it Dane
It's
Sinclair? Is
Dane
it Tom
Sinclair. Yep.
McGill? Right? So, because look, Dane Sinclair's had a very strong season, but Maxime Crépeau is an MLS Cup winner.
Yep.
Jonathan Sirois had an incredible season. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked there. Steven Vitória, we've seen a lot of people playing that middle center back position unconvincingly. Who's going to take Steven Vitória's position? These are questions you need to
Mm-hmm.
answer
Yeah.
now, because then you have to start building your team
You have to be
around it. And if
prepared.
you don't have an answer, then you have to start thinking, are we going four back? Are we changing the way we defend? Same thing as, are
Yep.
we changing the way we're using our goalkeeper? Because we haven't had all these goalies in significant spots for an
Mm-hmm.
extended amount of time, right? If they're in for a game or two, that's one thing. But if they're not in it for an extended period of time, then all of a sudden you are left with way too many variables and way too many unanswered questions when you're going into Copa America, which should be you're going in with your front foot and you're going in confident in the kind of team you are. And I don't think Montreal. I don't think Canada has any idea what kind of team they are. And I think Mauro Biello has to find that out as soon as possible. And you
Yeah.
have to do that with the younger players.
Well, I think it's hard as well because I mean, Mauro Biello, he's in the interim role, right? And I think the overwhelming expectation is he's not going to be made the permanent manager of this men's national team. So as well, a part of me wonders if he has kind of, I mean, if he has kind of the pull to bring in some of those other, like the players who you mentioned, I'm sure would, you know, answer the call at the drop of the hat. And of course, I know that if you do refuse a call up, you can be penalized, or if your club refuses to let you go, you can be penalized as well, or they can. But that being said, I wonder if maybe this is a lighter squad because kind of Canada Soccer is a little bit spinning their wheels as they continue their search for a permanent fixture in the men's national team role. Um, and even just the fact that they're only playing one match this window instead of two, as well. That being said, I think I do overall agree with you that like the time for some of the players who we mentioned there has to come to an end kind of sooner rather than later. We were really reaching the point where like, you know, super grateful, couldn't be more grateful for everything that they've done for Canada and showing up in some of Canada's darkest hours from a footballing perspective. But it's time to look to 2026, 100%. Anyway, I'll also be curious, I think, to see what happens up at the top end of the pitch because it looks, from the list, it looks like a ton of defensive-minded players were called. And I understand most of those players can play on the flanks and they might play as wingbacks or they're even as full wingers. And it's unfortunate that we're missing Tajon Buchanan through injury this window because, of course, he's always excellent on that right-hand side of the pitch, particularly. But no, it'll certainly be interesting to see what the men manage to pull off against an excellent Japanese national team, which is currently ranked 19th in FIFA, and who I think are a very interesting team to watch. I love their women's national team. I think their women's national team is amazing. Their men's national team is also quite good. And has a lot of very exciting players who, if you watch a lot of European football, you may well have seen because they have players playing all over the place. And I definitely think Canada is going to have their work cut out for them We have Chan, who had the take of Japan. Sorry, I was going to say Japanese. Japan going to win 3-0. And honestly, Canada did play Japan recently in a friendly just right before the World Cup happened. It was mid-November that they played, and Canada actually did win that game with a very, very late penalty scored by Lucas Cavallini. It was a 2-1 win. I recall that much. And it was kind of played like it was played in a neutral location and everything like that. And I think attendance was pretty small. But what are you looking to see in this match, Elias, from the men's national team?
Change, right? I think that our biggest complaint after the World Cup was that it looked like the team hadn't learned anything. When we watched
Mm-hmm.
the Nations League and we watched the Gold Cup, it looked like this team hadn't taken any lessons away from those defeats and kind of just stuck with it. And I just want to see some kind of evolution, right? And like you talked about, right, whether or not Mauro Biello is will be the head coach going into these tournaments, not necessarily a tactical change or tactical evolution. I need to see that these players have changed the way that they approach
Mm-hmm.
playing for the national team. I need to see that these players have taken these losses and taken these very difficult experiences, right, to say the least, and have brought it forward uh to this game, right? And whether or not they win or lose, I think that I need to see a Canadian team that is, first of all, a lot more unified and that
Mm-hmm.
plays a lot more as a cohesive unit. And whether or not that's down to the formation and more people playing in their positions and more people playing, with people with teammates that they're familiar with, and or if it's just straight up down to mentality, I'd love to see just a fresh face on this Canadian team. That's the biggest thing I can ask for.
Mm-hmm. I think it'll be really interesting to see what Mauro Biello takes out in the way of tactics. I think when we saw him coach Montreal, I thinking back now, I know he often took the helm for some of the youth national teams, at least on the men's side, when they went to some tournaments before kind of buckling down more so with John Herdman uh, in the lead up to the 2022 World Cup. But I think overall, like Mauro Biello, I don't think his strength was his tactics as a coach when he was with Montreal. I think his tactics were quite simplistic for the time.
I've completely
Um,
blanked that era out of my mind. So,
it was,
in all
well,
honesty,
okay, so you remember when they used to do the Derrière chaque victoire videos?
God, yes.
Like with the
Oh my
music?
God.
Yeah.
I
There
haven't
was
thought about I haven't thought about that in literally years. Oh my God. Wow.
So I can't remember exactly like how it was presented, but all I remember him going is just give the ball to Nacho. Which I mean, to be fair, is
Kicking
kind
and
of a
screaming.
valid tactic.
Look at the way he was playing. I would say the
Yeah,
same.
yeah, it's probably kind of a valid tactic, like in hindsight, but also, and maybe it's just like the way that was presented with very little context, and it just made it sound like that's all he has. But no, I mean, overall, I mean, his teams were like super counterattacking. There wasn't a whole lot of diversity in the formation. Um, so
Canada
yeah,
have the pace and the
exactly.
the ability to play that way. I think they could
Yeah,
play that way and be very,
and I
very,
think maybe
very
as the road,
potent.
yeah, and I
They just have to
expect
figure out who they are.
exactly. And I do expect Japan to be a very strong opponent. Obviously, they're going to be playing in Japan on Japan's home turf. So maybe a counterattacking approach is the right one for this match. Or maybe Mauro Biello has diversified his coaching repertoire since we've last seen him at the helm of a team. So anyway, I'll be really curious, and it is at 6:35 a.m. Eastern time on Friday
Oof.
morning. So
Oof.
set your alarms.
Oh.
We will be breaking this one down on our episode next week, or well, later this week, I guess is the better way to say it, on Sunday. But Elias, okay, if you're gonna struggle with that, I think you can probably also find a replay of it sometime before Sunday.
I mean, I with all the World Cup I watched in Australia and New Zealand, I
Oh
think I can
yeah,
manage for one more game.
there you go. That's the spirit.
Exactly.
Alrighty. Let's move on to another really probably my favorite piece because according to Hattie, I'm just a big softie for our women's team. Let's move
Good
on.
national team news back to back. That's crazy.
I know, right? It's kind of exciting.
It's been years.
Um, Although you were not super excited about the men's national team. You were kind of going in on like
Look, Mathieu Chouanier got
kind
his
of thing.
call up. Samuel Piet's
Okay,
back with the group.
you're happy.
I still see this as a partial win. I just think it could have been better. But
All right. Well, I'm gonna give you something, and you tell me if to me this is almost a full win. So we're gonna turn our attention now to the women's national team, who announced 2 friendlies coming up at the end of the month. So they announced both matches are going to be played against Brazil, a very familiar foe. The first of the 2 friendlies is going to be played at Stade Saputo in Montreal on October 28th, and the second is going to be played in Halifax at the Wanderers grounds on October 31st on Halloween. Ooh, spooky. So I'm really happy. How do you feel, Elias?
Finally. I mean what was it called? The celebration tour, the
Oh,
victory
the
tour.
Olympic. Yeah, the Olympic.
Yeah, the celebration tour. That's what I'm gonna call it.
Yeah, that's what it was, I think.
Was such a fun experience. It was such
It
a great
was.
crowd. And it was such
Oh,
a
that weather
fun
sucked,
game to go
but
and
it was
cover.
good.
The weather was terrible, but everyone was. I think
You were
everyone was
safe up
just
in the
too
press
happy.
box.
I was hanging out, I was chilling, but I think that it was such a great atmosphere, and can't wait to have that happen again. Against a team like Brazil, right? With
Yeah.
such a great rivalry and such a great team coming here. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
so excited. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm really, really, really happy that they're coming to Montreal. I think one of the things that we have a lot of gripes with is that the national team sticks so close to Toronto all the time. And I mean, the men's national team did travel a bit in the lead up to the World Cup, and of course, in the celebration tour, the women's team did travel around as well. Um, but I think it's nice to see them kind of really branching out from the stadiums that they usually visit instead of like just going to Vancouver, for example. And they did come to Stade Saputo in 2021 to celebrate the gold medal. But this is the first time that they're going to Nova Scotia, which is just wild for me. They haven't been to the Maritimes since
It's about
2012. No
time.
national team.
Really?
Yeah, seriously.
It's
That's
about
such a
damn
long
time.
time, right? I yeah, 2012, that's such a long time. And I understand, the infrastructure is a little bit challenging in the Maritimes. I'm from there, so I know. And even like the Wanderers grounds that they're going to, it's not a permanent stadium fixture. Like most everything it's all bleachers outdoors, and most everything is in a shipping container and all that. But it's so charming. People there are so passionate as well. I went to a Wanderers game when I was visiting my parents, and it was wild. It was like I was like, I can't believe you people are singing these songs, my kind and gentle Maritimers. So it was wonderful. No, but it's a really I think overlooked area of Canada that gets ignored a lot, and it's beautiful. The people there are very passionate, and I'm really excited that they get to see our women's national team play, because
Absolutely.
they can be good fun to watch unless they're playing at the World Cup.
But it's
Yeah,
the one time in a long time that they have been depressing to watch and not
that
enjoyable.
is true. Yeah.
So I'll give them that.
Yeah. So what do you make of the choice of Brazil as an opponent? Because I was like a little bit kind of meh about the choice, I guess, but then I did a little bit more digging and it kind of makes sense to me. So I'm gonna let you go first, and then I'll give my 2 cents.
Look, I think that Brazil has been a mainstay in the women's national team scene for ever, right? And I think
Mhm.
that having look, even if they have not been, they are not at their best right now. Um, it's always a talented team that comes, and they
Mhm.
always bring everything. And someone like Marta, one way or another, is one of the greatest players of all time. And I'm just looking forward to seeing her in the flesh, because that's going to be a really awesome experience. And I think that a lot of people are probably going to feel the same way, because let's be real here, she was one of the when women's soccer finally started to pick up some steam, she was, at the peak of
Hmm.
her powers, and she was, arguably one of, if not the best player in the world at that time, right? And if you think in the early mid 2010s, she was killing everybody, right? So I think that for it being, the first time Montreal, since the Celebration Tour, the first time in Nova Scotia ever having a team that's reliable and that is going to put on a good show like Brazil is a good choice. You know, I would have hoped
Yeah.
to see better opposition, not better opposition, that's not the right word, but um higher ranked opposition. But at the same time, I'm excited for this game, like one way or another. Um, I will be there.
Okay. So I don't want to burst your bubble, but Marta
Mhm.
retired after the World Cup from international football.
No!
I'm so sorry,
Oh,
Elias.
I thought I saw her on the squad list though.
The squad hasn't come out.
The Brazilian squad list came out, no?
Oh, they
Or
did.
is that
They.
a
I don't know what
professional
that piece
squad
of.
list?
I don't know what that piece of paper that floated around Twitter was. I don't read Portuguese. Um.
Because I saw her name on that, and I was like, I thought, because like I thought she retired, but then I saw her name on the list.
No,
So,
because she's
mm,
still playing like professionally. Like she's still playing
so
in
maybe she was called
NWSL.
up. Maybe she was
But
called up, but
because yeah, she did like, oh, it was a really, because they, when they got eliminated, like she did
you're
like
right.
her comments,
You're
I guess, post
right.
match,
I
and she said like,
remember
this
that.
is the end of the line for me. I'm so sorry.
Marta, if you're hearing this, for me, please, please, for me.
Okay. Oh
Oh,
God. Uh,
I will
uh,
still be there. I will still be
okay.
there.
I was gonna say I
Oh,
think
that
Brazil
paper.
has.
Oh, that paper got my hopes up. Oh no, I'm
I'm
gonna
so
find the paper
sorry.
now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna let you do that after we wrap up. But I'm really sorry. To break that one to
Oh,
you. Um. Because I, yeah, anyway, so they do have plenty of other extremely exciting players to watch though, so i think
yes,
i think you'll be okay.
yes, that's
um
true. Marta
i
was just
i
one of my favorite players. That's why.
no, Marta was one of, well, and she's still actively playing, so she remains one of the classiest, I think, women's footballers out there for sure. But
Don
unfortunately,
Garber
yeah.
broke Eve's brain, and now this broke my brain. So now we are both broken.
Oh boy. All right. I was gonna say though that like I was kind of a little bit nonplussed to see them playing Brazil again, just because Canada has played Brazil so many times recently. They've played
Yeah, that's
against
fair.
Brazil. They had two friendlies last year. They played against them as well at the She Believes Cup.
Leagues Cup. Yeah.
Um, and so I was kind of like, again, like you're gonna have played them 5 times in the space of 12 months, which seems excessive. But I came to realize, I was like, well, why couldn't they have played, X, Y, or Z? But the Asian and
Same.
African federations are both doing their Olympic qualifying right now, or during the upcoming window.
Hmm.
And the European Federation is doing their Nations League. So they're all doing like proper competitive matches,
Oh, okay, yeah, that
or
makes sense.
playing proper competitive matches, if you will. So really, like the only options would have been teams that are in CONCACAF, which Canada knows like the back of their hand, or CONMEBOL, or of course like one of the teams in the other federations with competitive matches that maybe have been eliminated or aren't participating. But then that wouldn't necessarily be like tier one opposition, which I think Canada does need.
Hmm.
So at the end of the day, I think Brazil is a
It's
logical
true. It's
choice.
a good
And
point.
so I
Yeah,
am
that's a good
I am a
point.
lot less annoyed, a lot less salty. And when these two teams do play, it's generally a really fun match to watch. It's generally exciting, a lot of attacking skill on display. I think both teams really have to show up and give their best acquittal of themselves in order to take a result from this match. So I think both matches are going to be really good to watch. And that's my 2 cents. Last thing I'm going to ask you on this
Yes.
one before we wrap up. Who would you like to see Beth Priestman call up? Are there any names kind of maybe that have been hovering on the radar that you would like to see?
See, I was really happy with the Jamaica squad with who they
Okay.
called up. Overall, I think that
Yeah.
that was a really, really solid group,
Mhm.
and we talked about it, right, when we talked about the Jamaica games on the show, and I said that in my eyes, I wasn't, fuming that anybody had hadn't
Mhm.
gone called up, or, there were spots that I felt could have been better allocated. So I think that, given that they're friendlies and not competitive games, if Bev Priestman wants to make a few tweaks here and there and to maybe
Mhm.
get some eyes on some different players that maybe on the bubble last time, I'm not totally opposed to it, but I don't think that there's anyone that I'm gonna be beating the drum for to have them included,
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
especially for friendlies.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think I would kind of like to see Bev Priestman lean a little bit younger. You know,
Mhm.
say for example, if Christine Sinclair is going to continue to figure in this squad, I don't know if it's a necessity that she be called in, for these matches, especially as Portland is going to be going into playoff mode as well. I'm sure she's going to want to manage her fitness, and I think whatever she wants to do with her life, she can.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. Overall, I was quite pleased with the balance of the squad that was called up to face Jamaica. I think I'd like to see some more time given to some other players who maybe didn't get as much of a look in. Of course, I'm always captain of the Evelyn Vieng hype train. I'd like to see Gabrielle Carl get a start. I thought she had a really interesting sub performance when she came on during the match that took place in Toronto. Sydney Collins as well is another player who kind of came out of nowhere, who I'd like to see get some minutes again as well, because there is kind of a big question mark on that left flank. And yeah, it'll be cool to see as well if Chloe
Chloe
Leca
Leca.
just took
There's
the
another
words from my
one.
mouth.
And
She's
that's a little into raptures, yes.
She scored a heck of a goal last Friday for Arsenal to get them a point from their match with Man United. So I think that would be, I think she's going to be coming into this probably in pretty decent form, which will definitely make things interesting.
Oh,
So
I'd love to
yeah,
see her put one in
that's
like
that's
that,
the Fudo,
score another goal like that. Oh my god, the place would explode. So
wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
definitely here
Yeah,
for that.
totally. Oh, especially, absolutely, wholeheartedly agree.
Especially
Um,
how offense starved the city has been in general. I think
mm-hmm,
it'd be nice to
mm-hmm.
see some good attacking play on display for once.
Agree. Agree. So anyway, it'll definitely be really interesting to see who Bev Priestman calls. And of course, when we do learn who is part of that squad, we will have a chat about it here on the Ball is Round.
Absolutely.
Might be next week, might be the week after, but one of those weeks we'll have a chat. And just to remind folks, particularly those of you based in Montreal, the matches are on the 28th and on the 31st. And if I'm not mistaken, tickets go on sale on October 14th if you do want to go out and support the women's national team in person. Oh yeah, because we do also have East Coast listeners, at least two. And the Holy Gale will be making an appearance at the Halifax match. So
Oh,
good for
hell
her.
yeah.
She's doing a road trip. All right. So let's anything else to add before we move along to social media, Elias?
No, that's about it.
Wonderful. Then in that case, you give me one sec.
Yes. The big bad
Okay.
world of the Twitters.
Excellent. Just one sec, because I realized that I forgot to upload one of them, but we'll get started with your first one. Alrighty.
Yes. So this, I'm sure that a lot of you have seen this tweet before. It's from Paul Watson. I'm asking again for a World Cup for the bottom 32 teams in the FIFA men's rankings. Includes teams like San Marino, Anguilla, British Virgin Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, Turks and Caicos, Sri Lanka, Guam, Bahamas, Liechtenstein, Gibraltar, Pakistan, Cayman Islands, and I'm sure a host of other countries that don't get, the visibility due to their rankings and are often seen as, you know, punching bags when it comes to their games
Yeah.
against bigger opposition and qualifiers and stuff like that. Have you seen this tweet? What do you think of it?
No, I
And
haven't.
are you disappointed with the fact that FIFA basically immediately shut that down the first time that they were asked?
I kind of think it would be comedic. to watch. I don't know if I'd be able to take it super seriously. Mind you, like if anyone
I
tried to
feel
put
like
me out on a
a
soccer
lot
field,
of people would realize that the level is much higher than what they're expecting, right? Because they're expecting basically
like
just a blooper fest. But like
yeah,
these are still national team players,
yeah.
and I think that a lot of them are very passionate.
Huh.
And I think
I'm sure
you
they'd be
put them
very
in a
proud to
position
represent.
where they can actually win games
Yeah,
and win a trophy would be a lot cooler than just
yeah,
having them show up every 2 years to a qualifier match, get
and lose
the
16 to
socks beat off
nothing.
them, and then
Yeah,
bring back home.
yeah. I'd be curious, if it would incentivize development of soccer in those nations. And I understand like not all of them might would even have like kind of the population to sustain necessarily a super complex national team setup because I mean these are countries with minute land sizes, let alone population sizes. Um, so like logistically speaking, I'm not 100% sure how feasible it would be, but
I
I
mean,
think
they would find a host nation, right? And they would with proper infrastructure, because again, you can't have this game on the
like
island of
played on the
Gibraltar,
same
which
one
is,
pitch.
yeah, which
Yeah,
is like, half the size of the island of Montreal. You can't really
yeah.
go about that. But there would be like a host nation that has the actual proper infrastructure
Mhm.
needed. And it would play during an international break or something, right?
Yeah,
And it would just be like a
maybe.
2 week tournament that highlights some of the
The
some of the teams that don't get
forgotten
as much love.
nations.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Because again, they're just seen as footnotes in
very
qualifiers. And
much
that's
so.
basically the only airtime they get is when they happen to be
Yeah,
drawn against the big team that gets crushed 4-0 by the third stringers and then gets forgotten about
yeah,
again until the next game they play.
yeah. Patrick brings up a good point, though. That's what Nations League is for. And I mean, that's kind of a good point. It's a tournament and you get seeded at your different level of the Nations League. So that is kind of like a decent point. And as well, given if they participate in Nations League, then as well I'm not intimately familiar with all of the different federations, how they roll, but hopefully that would mean that then they would also get a chance to host some matches, right? Or a match at least,
That is true, but
which is
yeah, because I
meaningful.
mean, same even qualifiers they host games too, right? But the thing is,
Yep.
if are you really gonna watch Division E or F or something when
I
you
bet
know
the
that
people
Belgium's playing France?
I bet the people from those nations who would be very encouraged. They'd be like, "Oh my god, we finally have a chance to not lose." Um yeah, I'm gonna lie, I'm kind of skeptical on the bottom 32 World Cup. I am. Sorry. You see, I told you
There's the
my contrarian was
pessimistic.
gonna come out. There you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. No, I
We
had
almost made it. We almost made it
we
to the end,
almost
but
made it. I'm sorry. I had to spoil it for you. Shall we move on?
let's move on. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is from Dr. Foot. This is, do you think, just like Jeff from BBN Media, that CF Montreal is a better team than their current ranking? And we've seen Montreal drop a lot of
Who
points
voted?
that they shouldn't have. We've seen a lot of points that they shouldn't have got that they ended up with. Where do you stand, and what do you think that where do you think Montreal ranks amongst
Mhm.
the Eastern Conference teams? And do you think that eighth is fair?
Okay, so did you vote in the poll? Because there's like a little tick next to
Yeah.
the we.
Yeah, I
Okay,
voted
so
yeah.
because I'm gonna say that you did not vote on behalf of the ball is round because I think that
No,
no,
that's my
Montreal.
personal account. That was my personal account that I took
Oh,
the tweet
okay.
from.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
was just poking fun, kind of. I was like, this is not
Oh,
TBIR's official
you do
stance.
not speak for me.
Well, like it kind of looks like it because we put it up on the screen, right?
That's fair. That's fair.
No, I don't think Montreal has a better team than their current standings. Like, if we look at say the teams that are above Montreal in the standings, like Nashville has built a squad beyond honestly. Atlanta, I don't think I need to say anything. New England has done a really good job of finding young players, selling them for a buttload of money. Goodbye, Georgie Petrovic. They've got some interesting youth that have come up through their ranks. They've drafted really, really well many times in the super draft. I'm just gonna like knock them out here.
Yeah.
Columbus. don't need to say too much there. Obviously, they've invested in their DPs, and their DPs have just been phenomenal. Philadelphia is the club that I want to emulate so desperately. Orlando, honestly, Orlando and Cincinnati at the top of the pyramid, they may be like my two where I'm like, I don't know if like their top to bottom recruitment is super on point, but they have found some very, very effective players that I think can cover for some other less effective spots in their roster. And as well, I think Orlando's done a really great job with their drafting in recent years, and they're finally starting to see their B team pay off as well. And their MLS Next Pro team now, as it would be.
Yep.
So I think the teams that are above Montreal, I think, like looking at their roster, I think, yeah, it makes total sense that they're above Montreal.
I just think that it's taken basically a crash course in Murphy's Law to have Montreal in the position they're in, right? Because we talked about it. Montreal has had everything go against them.
Totally.
Whether if it could have gone bad for them, it has gone bad. Whether it's injuries, whether it's results that just don't make sense sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the first 7 games where they're 1-6, and if they take a point or two, or even they managed to MacGyver a win against Miami, for example, in that first game of the season where they
Mm-hmm.
missed like 4 or 5 chances and hit the post, stuff like that. All of a sudden, they're on Nashville's heels.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this team is better than 8th place on
Mm-hmm.
paper. I
Okay.
just don't think that I don't think they're anywhere near like those top 5, if you will, for example. But I think they're
Mm-hmm.
much closer on paper to Nashville than they are to who's in 9th place right now, Chicago
Well,
or DC.
technically, DC. They
DC,
eliminated
right?
DC, so I don't even know if you want to say that they're in ninth place because we know they're not going to finish there. So New York Red Bulls or
I think they're
Chicago.
much closer on paper. I think they're much closer to Nashville than they are to the other teams.
Yeah, I kind of. I feel like they're like squarely in between them. I feel like they're,
That's
yeah,
fair. That's fair.
smack in the
But I
middle
think they're
there.
closer to 7 than they are to 9.
Okay. Okay. I don't know.
Especially if
I'm
they
gonna.
somehow, by the grace of God, find out how to play on the road. Oh,
Oh yeah. Okay, that's a different story. But that's with the
but
current
that's
roster.
that's
So
but that's a whole bunch of hypothetical. I'm talking about on paper now.
yeah. Okay, on paper, yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. I don't know. No, I think they're where they belong
That's
in
fair.
the hierarchy. I do.
That's fair.
And in fact, I think they've done better than I expected. So there you go.
Wow.
Well, yeah. Then other teams have done way worse than we expected. So it's like,
That is
hit.
also very true.
Yeah. Some giveth and some taketh away. All right.
That is
Next
the
one.
MLS way. Next
Mm-hmm.
one. Yes, this is from Matsushima. Romel Kyoto in 2024. I would try contract at $700,000 a year with 1-year option. What about you? If you say below 500,000, obviously forget it. The guy won't want it. But we saw that Romel Kyoto has not had any contract talks.
Mm-hmm.
His contract is up at the end of the season, and a lot of people had kind of taken it for granted that this would be his last year, given the injuries and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that there just hasn't been any news on the
Yeah.
contract front.
Yeah.
If they get him for 750 thousand a year, is that something you take, knowing full well that it's very likely that you get at best
Half a season.
2/3 or half a season of Romel Kyoto?
That's a really hard call, I think. I kind of feel like it's not going to happen because it was pretty clear that Olivier Renard was not super impressed with him, during some of the time that he was way injured. But he does bring he's the most technically gifted striker that they have. He's the most senior striker. I mean, he's adapted to living in Montreal. So like there's so much of those growing pains that you would have to go through bringing in a new striker to kind of be like your big main striker, which I don't think any of the current strikers can be or are ready to be. Could they be in the future? Maybe. But this was a hard one.
That's what we do at social media.
I know, I don't like it. I think I will say yes, because usually what happens with Romel Kyoto is you get 1 year super duper injured, then 1 year fairly healthy, then 1 year super duper injured, then so you should be due for 1 year fairly healthy. So you might get closer to that 2/3 of a season. Yeah,
2/3 of season. Wow.
that's
That's
all we
great
can
by
hope
that's
for.
great. No, that's great by his standards. That's great by his standards.
Yeah. That being said, though, I don't think it will happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I think if it were going to, it would have already been dealt with. That's usually how we've seen the Olivier Renard way go. And sometimes he makes you an offer and then lets you walk, and maybe you come crawling back. But we'll see.
Maybe you don't.
Yeah, and I see lots of feelings from Patrick. So Patrick disagrees and says that 750 is too much, no more than 600, and that Patrick also believes that they're going to bring someone new in. What about
They
you,
have to.
Elias? Would you? Yeah. Would you do?
I'd roll the dice. If you can get him
Yeah.
for 600 or 700, I'd roll the dice and go one more year, because
Okay.
look, especially given the fact that, look, the Michael Milovic of it all, that's opened up a decent amount. That's opened up basically one Romel Kyoto size contract if you do get him for 700, right? Because Michael made 650, if I'm not mistaken, right? So if you're telling me for 50,000 more, I can get an extra year of Romel Kyoto, that is the easiest decision you will ever have to make.
Mm-hmm.
And that does open you up, and that does open you for the chance to bring in your Romel Kyoto replacement on Romel Kyoto money. And everything ends up flush. So
I know.
the
I feel
numbers are
softly
there.
prepared for the
The
Montreal way.
numbers are there, but again, whatever happens, happens. But I think
Whatever
that
happens.
makes a lot of sense.
Fair enough. Well, either way, I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to instead choose to spend their dollars on a new striker. Maybe. Yeah,
I wouldn't be
that's
surprised.
that's the feeling
Would not
that
be
I have
surprised.
anyway. But obviously, we'll see, and we'll certainly keep our eyes on it as the offseason develops, whenever the offseason starts for Montreal. And next tweet.
Next tweet. Yes, this is from Simpap. And again, this is just, reveling in it now. If you look at the first place of this, this is a tweet from MLS Moves about, early Eastern Conference predictions back in February. And if you look at first place and 15th place, you will get the gist of my tweet. Where
You
do you
have to tell
think
the people
people
who are
out?
listening to our pod during the
You're right.
week
Sorry.
what's in first and what's in 15th.
First place is TFC. 15th place, dead last, is Montreal. What do you
That take
think
aged
the
like
people
milk.
outside Montreal got so wrong about the team, and so wrong about Toronto as well? But what do you think, more specifically, people, analysts outside of Montreal, got so wrong about the team that they ended up not only not dead last, but in the thick of it and very well could host a playing game?
I think they overestimated actually a lot of the opposition teams. Obviously, Toronto being one. Just looking at this particular individual, having Inter Miami in fourth made no sense whatsoever, given where Inter
Even
Miami was
before Messi.
preseason.
Even before Messi.
No, even way before Messi. Well, let's face it, in the post-Messi era, they got that great string of results, but then kind of it has been kind of slowing down a little there. Yeah, I don't know, man. This guy's take was like I can make some bad
Definitely
takes.
something.
So I can be self-effacing about my own bad takes, but like this is not a great one that this guy had. Yeah, no, like I think overall that people overestimated several teams. I think that was most of the error that we saw this season. And I think people just tend to kind of place Montreal in around those last positions because they almost like forget about Montreal. It's that random French market removed
Like,
way
yeah,
up to
we'll
the
throw them in
northeast.
wherever. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just kind of like, I'm just gonna slot them in where no one else fits, because we've seen it time and time again. Kind of the different pundits, like the MLSsoccer.com ones are the ones I'm thinking of. They kind of are always all over the place with Montreal, you know, and they're not often spot on. And so I also think it's kind of just like a lack of knowledge of Montreal. And we don't have names here that are going to draw a lot of attention from the media that covers the league, and things like that, or make the various Apple TV promotional segments. Like we don't have necessarily that capital. And so I also think like a part of it is, I don't mean it in an unkind way, but a part of it is just ignorance of Montreal. Like they just don't know them well enough.
So,
It would be like me
I thought
trying to
I
give
thought
my takes on the
mostly the
Western
same.
Conference.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You go mostly off reputation and just like,
Yeah, you go off
general vibe.
reputation, and you're like, well, I can't name any players who are there. I don't know who their coach is. Like I haven't watched a ton of their games, so I'm just kind of by process of elimination. I'm not saying that's what this individual did. Obviously, don't know his thought process or their thought process, but yeah, no, that's kind of my thought. And
I
as well,
think
I
we're in
think,
agreement on that.
yeah. And my last thought would just be, I think a lot of people expected there to be a really big post Nancy hangover.
There was, but it only lasted 7 games. I think that's the thing.
Yeah. Well, for some people in their hearts, it's lasted all season.
That is true, but
That is,
at least on the score sheet, it lasted 7 games, and then they kind
yeah,
of got their act together for a little bit,
for a little bit. Yeah.
just for a
All
little
right.
bit.
Last tweet.
Final tweet, yes. This one is from Dwayne Rollins. Just got confirmation that a Quebec-based local club has been working to find investors to make a CPL jump. Part of next week's Next Pod Soccer interview. Who do you think it is? Who would you like it to be? And more importantly, how big is this for just soccer, Quebec soccer in general? That we've had a lot of PLSQ
Mhm.
/ League One Quebec teams do quite well in the grand scheme of semi-professional soccer to make the jump to that pro level.
A lot of choices.
I've got 3 that I think
Okay.
could fit well.
You hit me.
Um, 1 is Blainville because again they were
Yeah,
the
Ozman
biggest club
there.
in PLSQ, and they were the
Mhm.
first ones to really take the big step towards
Mhm.
organizing like a professional club. You have CSMRO who are right
Mhm.
behind them and have been around just as long, and you have Saint Laurent who have been incredibly well structured,
Yeah.
and people around the amateur game have known
Mhm.
them as powerhouses forever, and they
Mhm.
finally took that next step. um it took them a long time. I don't understand why it took them so long, given that they had such an incredible crop of talent. I think those 3 are all have the infrastructure needed um to already have like a really good feeder system and a really interesting infrastructure to just get to the next level. And Blavel has a
Interesting.
lot of real estate to build a stadium. So I think that also has to factor in
Mhm.
that they might be, if we're talking about in Montreal, I think they are probably the best in terms of location wise, because they're going to
Yeah.
have to build an actual stadium, and building a stadium in MRO and Saint Laurent is not exactly doable right now. So I think that Blainville has a
No.
good bet.
No, and I overall agree with you that I think Blainville is like the most established. And so they'd have like as well, they'd have a ready-made fan base going in.
I've
But
been
at the
to some
same
of those
time,
PLSQ
Mhm.
games, and those are fun. They go all out. They've got flares, they've got drums, they've got a supporter section.
Exactly.
They take it very seriously.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Have to listen, I guess, and find out.
Absolutely.
Have to tune in and find out who. Um,
Mm.
yeah, no, I'm curious. All right, so that wraps up social media for this evening.
Yes, it does.
Thus, I will say thank you to those of you who joined us live for our a little bit out of the usual recording on a Tuesday evening. So thanks so much for joining us and for accommodating our random schedule change. We should be back to our regularly scheduled programming on Sunday at 7:30 Eastern time, of course, live. And we'll break down the men's national team friendly and whatever other soccer news arises between now and then. And Elias, I'd like to thank you as well for joining me this evening
Of
as
course.
I did my best to keep us going in Hattie's absence. Last but not least, I do just want to remind everybody that our content is always going to be free. However, if you do want to support us and help us grow our project, we do have a Patreon, and we are incredibly grateful for any support that you can give us. Thanks as well to those of you who are going to be listening throughout this week. As always, feel free to send us any comments or questions or anything that you have, and we'll be happy to talk about them on the next episode of The Ball is Round.